Welcome everyone. Thank you for the work lyrics. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you for the follow. New person, hello. Ooh, I am stuck already. There we go. Alright. Things seem to be moving. Slightly moving. Should I move my chair? Alright. Here we go. Hopefully this looks okay. And no disasters are happening. Maybe. Maybe. Alright. I apologize ahead of time if anybody hears hammering or loud noises. There's a renovation project downstairs and I don't know when it'll be done. If I wait for it to be finished, it could be, 6 months from now, and then I'll never have streamed. So thank you for attending, everyone. Again, apologize for any noise that may occur. I'm still trying to figure out where to look for my camera. I have 3 monitors set up right now, and I'm not sure which one to look at. One has my notes, one has the slides, one has the OBS, so it's a bit complicated. This is my first time doing it like this. First world problems. So if there's ever any issues, feel free to let me know. Alright, so today we're going to talk about the geography of Japan. And here we have our friend, the snow monkey, the macaque, chilling in his hot spring, and we'll talk about the monkeys, and we'll talk about hot springs and why they exist in Japan in today's meeting. All right. Okay. Next slide. Ooh, it worked. It worked. I did something correctly. Alright, this is a map of Japan at the last glacial maximum in the late Pleistocene epoch about 20,000 years ago. And what that means is this is the Ice Age, and the waters were, receded, and there were land bridges connecting Japan to parts of what are now Russia and Korea. And this allowed people to come over from the mainland and cross over into what is Japan today. So we're not 100% sure when the people came over, but probably around, 20,000 years ago, we had people coming over. Hello, Narapi. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So that is basically when we assume humans started to come over onto the Japanese islands. Obviously, it wasn't Japan at that point. But we don't have like a written record because nobody was writing at that point. This is the prehistoric era. And when we say prehistoric, we mean there is no writing yet. So history is like the writing of our story, basically, is what it means. So prehistory is we don't have writing yet. Nobody's writing yet. So today we have, it's not the Ice Age. I mean, it is technically an Ice Age, but we don't have the same types of land bridges currently. And Japan is comprised of 6,852 islands. It is no longer connected directly to Russia. It's no longer connected directly to Korea by land bridges. Hello, fanfic. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. If there's ever any technical issues where you can't hear me or you can't see me or anything like that, let me know. Hello, Bumble. Welcome. Welcome. So the four main islands of Japan are Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. I mentioned that the last time we met as well, and you can see them on this map here. And so you can see where the land bridges were about 20,000 years ago, and then the modern coastline today. And the coastlines are even changing a lot today because of various environmental issues. So Japan is about 146,000 square miles. It is the 62nd largest country in the world. It is approximately the square size of Montana, if you're familiar with, the United States and, an idea about how big Montana is. But it is larger in landmass than many of the world's countries, including the United Kingdom and Italy. And one of the reasons that is because it's so mountainous, and we'll talk more about that. So if you superimpose Japan along the east coast of the United States, if you're familiar with the east coast of the United States, it would run from central Maine down to Florida. So that kind of gives you a bit of a better idea of the actual size of it. Oftentimes we have maps that just show Japan as a completely isolated entity, and you really have you don't have a good idea of how close it is to Russia and Korea. But so I like to include this kind of map that really shows you how close it is to the Asian mainland. So about 126.3 million people currently live here. It is the 11th most populated country in the world. It is 36th in population density. So it's very close to many countries, and you can actually easily island hop all the way down to Taiwan and the Philippines. I apologize if you hear my dog drinking water because he's a very loud drinker of water. Not sure why. I guess it's just how he was born. And of course, once you go past the Philippines, Indonesia, New Guinea, Australia are all along that line. So there's a lot of islands that you can actually traverse your way down. So Japan has gone through several phases of relative isolation and globalization. Globalization meaning interconnectedness with other regions of the world. We often think of Japan as, the so-called hermit kingdom. Thank you, Red Panda. And you can hear the Slurpee Pooch. Oh, great. I'm glad the microphone can pick that up. So globalization meaning interconnectedness to other regions of the world. So throughout Japanese history, it did get a lot of, people and ideas coming over from the mainland, from what we know of as China and Russia and Korea today. And then there's other periods of time where Japan sort of cut itself off. Hello, Banana. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So prior to, and we'll get into the history more in future meetings, but prior to a certain American showing up in the mid-1800s and reopening the country, we like to think of Japan was closed for 2,000 years. That's how it's often portrayed in history books, that you just had this heroic American show up in the mid-1800s and open up the islands to the rest of the world. And that's not really accurate, because Japan has about a 2,000-year history, and there were, periods of intense contact with other sections of Asia prior to, these periods of isolation. So it goes back and forth between that. It vacillates between isolation and globalization, and we'll talk more about that history in future meetings. But you can see how close Japan actually is to its neighboring countries. So of course it makes sense that it would have a, interconnectedness with the neighboring countries, and not, it's not literally sitting in the middle of the Pacific or something where no one can reach it. All right. Moving on. All right, let's touch the other computer because I have my notes on the other computer and I am already forgetting. So here we have a sort of geologic map of Japan. As you can see, it is right off the east coast of Asia, and its landscape is defined by its position at the intersection of 4 tectonic plates. So you can see the 4 plates here, along. We have this basically this weird X that is happening, and the 4 plates are meeting right where Japan is, which is why we have Japan. The fact that these 4 plates are meeting, and you can see that the Pacific plate is pushing towards Japan, and essentially it's pushing Japan upwards out of the ocean, and that's why Japan exists. It is the world's most geologically active zone, and on the Japanese islands we have evidence of this geologic activity. And it's very obvious. We have very steep mountain ranges which cover about 80% of the landmass. These rise out of plains, and we also have dormant and active volcanoes, about 186 of these in total. And we have mineral waters that well up out of the ground. So you can see how the plates move and which plates we're talking about here in this image. And here you can get an idea of which plates meet in that X in the center here, with the Pacific plate right here, and that is called the Ring of Fire. The Pacific plate is so active that it is called the Ring of Fire because it is constantly moving. So out of all the countries in the world, Japan is the most prone to natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunami, flooding, typhoons, mudslides, and fires. And unfortunately, many of its major cities sit along these fault lines that we see here. So this is a satellite image of Japan, and even in the satellite image, you can see the fault lines very clearly. Disasters, exactly, banana, disasters. Very. So there are over 1,000, sometimes up to, it's Banana's fault? Oh, okay. I will be sure to write to the UN being like, by the way, all the disasters in Japan are Banana's fault. So there are over 1,000, sometimes up to 2,000 earthquakes that happen each year here. And if you do the math, that basically means there's about 50 earthquakes a day happening in Japan, somewhere on the islands. A lot of these, as I said last time, humans can't necessarily feel them happening, but they are happening. So, like I said, the Pacific plate is always moving. And in particular for Japan, it moves toward Japan 3.5 inches every year, basically pushing at Japan. And then you have the other tectonic plates pushing against the Pacific plate. So it's this little battle. Banana says it's not his fault. I tried to commit to my love for Pangea that I tried to put it back together. Oh, man, that would be exciting. If Banana had that power to make our supercontinent again, that would be pretty exciting. That would be very exciting. All right. So, of course, within our lifetime, everybody probably remembers the March 11th, 2011 earthquake. It was a 9.1 magnitude earthquake which occurred off the east coast of Japan it is the strongest earthquake in recorded Japanese history. And like I said, for Japanese recorded history, we have about 2,000 years of it. The earthquake knocked the earth off its global axis about 6 inches. That is not a unique thing. Often very big earthquakes do knock the earth off of its global axis a little bit. But this 6 inches is pretty significant. And it also moved Honshu, which is our main island that we see here. This is Honshu. It moved Honshu 10 feet eastwards, basically towards the United States. So imagine that Japan is essentially like a playing card that you're pinching between your two fingers, right? And that's how you got the mountains, basically. But all of a sudden, the plates shift in such a way that you let go of that playing card, right? And essentially, the playing card flattens and it moves outward. And that is essentially what happened on March 11th, 2011. And that's why we get the Japan moving 10 feet eastward, essentially. So here we have a map showing where the earthquakes tend to happen, and we have the little nuclear power plants, which we'll be talking about here. This is an earthquake that happened in 2016, and then it shows you where the epicenters were in 2011, and you can see they're all of these beautiful red dots, being like, please don't live near here. It's probably not a good idea. But, of course, people still do live here. So this over here shows us, the map of like where the red zone is, which is where the tsunami came in, which we'll be talking about as well. So the tsunami followed the earthquake with waves about 130 to 133 feet high in places, and the waves rolled in at 500 miles per hour, which is essentially the speed of a jet. So it penetrated the coastline inland as far as 6 miles, bringing debris, cars, boats, houses, basically just carrying all of that stuff in for 6 miles. There were 20,000 deaths, 6,000 injuries, and 80,000 displaced families. About 500,000 people were evacuated from the affected area during the catastrophe. So here you can see a map of the tsunami wave activity, basically. So the purple zone is how it moved towards Japan. So you can see that like the angry purple zone moving towards Japan. And then it actually rolled out all along the Ring of Fire. So you had high waves over in California, you had high waves all along this Ring of Fire, and this map shows you how the water moved. And again, that was caused by the underwater earthquake. So it will likely cost hundreds of billions of dollars to reconstruct the area of Japan that was hit by this earthquake and tsunami and clean up after this disaster. One of the major projects in the last 10 years has been to raise the seawall along the coastline of Japan in many areas, because this tsunami proved that the existing walls were not nearly high enough. Alright. So moving along. So the tsunami also caused massive coastal flooding in major regions, and you can see here that this is basically a town. This was a town, and then it flooded completely, and the coastline essentially changed. So they had, if they had to like work to reclaim this land and then build the walls up to keep the ocean out, essentially. And you can see how, the floods caused fires. And, of course, the most important part of this is that it caused a nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima power plant. So the earthquake shook the plants. They shut down appropriately. and then the backup cooling generators for the cores turned on. Because if you turn off a nuclear power plant, the reactors are still incredibly hot, right? It's not like a light switch that you just turn it off and the reactors are suddenly cool. So the backup cooling generators for the cores turned on, but when the tsunami flooded the generators failed, and then the cores overheated on 3 out of 6 of the reactors. And this caused a hydrogen explosion, and then radioactive materials were released into the air. Why the Japanese decided to build nuclear power plants along an earthquake-prone coast, someone will have to explain that to me, because it makes no sense to me. But this was a harsh lesson to learn. So Japan has built about 54 nuclear reactors, but currently, today, only a fraction of them are operational. Yes, Narapi, it does seem like, someone missed the logic there. Because obviously Japan has been prone to earthquakes and tsunamis forever, essentially, so this wasn't news. So after this disaster, Japanese opinions towards nuclear power have become very negative, because it seems very clear that it's difficult to prevent this type of thing from happening again. So why have the power plants in the first place? Is a big risk. But Japan is very resource poor. It has inferior coal seams, it has no petroleum, it is very reliant upon imports, as well as hydroelectric and nuclear power. For instance, when the power plants stopped functioning, essentially, like half of Japan had no power. So this is a big issue, and something that they need to solve in the future so that this doesn't happen again. So cleanup of the Fukushima site will take decades, and it will also take decades to learn about the effects the radiation has had on the region's people and environment. And this is an example of the type of, basically the debris, the damage of the tsunami, basically knocking down houses and taking the houses with the waves. So it's fairly clear from this kind of image about why so many people died. It was very fast wave, as I said before, very high, very powerful, and a lot of the electricity for the tsunami alarms wasn't operational. So people didn't hear the tsunami alarms, because Japan has tsunami alarms that go off and say, like, leave and run away from the coast, except the alarms didn't go off in many of the towns. So like I said, it's going to take a while to clean this up. It's going to take years to figure out how to deal with the radioactive stuff, and how to deal with how to live in this area again. Can we safely live in this area again? So many controversies about the Fukushima site in particular still continue today, even 10 years later. For example, in April 2020, not so long ago, it was announced that Japan's government decided to begin dumping more than 1 million tons of treated but still radioactive wastewater from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant into the ocean within 2 years. So this is water that was basically used to cool and clean the reactors after they exploded, and they just have barrels and barrels and barrels of it sitting there, and it's cleaned, but it's not actually like totally not radioactive. So how safe is it? And they're going to dump this into the ocean within the next 2 years, and a lot of people are pretty angry about that. It happens in a lot of other places in the world, though, so Japan is like, hey, everybody else does this. Just through natural manufacturing, there is waste that goes into the ocean. So what environmental impact will this dumping have on, the people, the seafood industry? Basically, it's like, we're going to find out. We're going to find out what's going to happen. All right. Moving along. I still haven't gotten the hang of the fact that I have two computers going and I need to use two mices, mooses, I don't know, something, mooses. All right. So another famous disaster in Japan was the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake. You can see an image of it here. This measured 7.9 on the Richter scale. Obviously, it took place in 1923, and it hit the Tokyo and Yokohama region, also along the East Coast. So the East Coast has a particularly bad history of this stuff. So in 1923, there were no seismic-friendly buildings, and seismic-friendly means they will hopefully stand up to earthquake activity. A lot of buildings in Japan are built so that they sway with an earthquake, but they don't fall. And obviously in 1923, that was not, that technology was not happening yet. So a lot of fires began when the earthquake struck, and then these were fueled by strong winds that came down from the hills, and this led to firestorms and over 100,000 deaths. So it's one of the worst disasters in Japanese history. Unfortunately, there are a couple more that are also very horrible, and we'll talk about those in future meetings. So most traditional Japanese homes are made of wood and paper. So you can see in this image here that's basically everything is flattened, right? Everything fell, everything burned. There's basically not a lot left. You have 4 buildings that you can still see, right? Maybe one in the distance, 5. So when you have a house made of wood and paper, this is very convenient for the earthquakes, because when your house falls and maybe you're still in it, you won't be crushed to death in your stone house. Like if you had a stone house and it falls, then you're dead. If you have a lightweight wood house with paper walls, you have slightly less of a risk of dying during an earthquake. But obviously, if you have a house made of wood and paper, it is incredibly flammable. So this is one of the reasons that Japan has bathhouses, and they're so prevalent throughout history, is because you would have, fires to heat the water would be centrally located in one building in a neighborhood, instead of everyone having an individual fire in their household for heating bath water and things like that. So it was a way to minimize the amount of fires that people were creating, because very flammable cities. And of course, throughout Japanese history, there's one story after another of cities completely burning, either by accident or during war or conflict, rebellion, revolts, things like that. So another thing to keep in mind, so this here is 1923 Yokohama, which is right next to Tokyo. Another thing to keep in mind for Japan's geography are typhoons. I mentioned that before. Typhoons are a regular occurrence. Usually every November, Japan essentially has a typhoon season, kind of like in the United States. We have a hurricane season, in the Caribbean, hurricane season. And these bring hurricane force winds and rains that typically hit the southeastern part of the country. The typhoons usually lose strength as they head toward the Tokyo region, but they do substantial damage annually and do lead to deaths. And you can see here this metal roof of a car repair plant that was ripped off and basically destroyed during a typhoon. So this is just something that happens on a regular basis for them, unfortunately. All right. Moving along. Clicking all the things. All right. So thanks to our friendly tectonic plates, Japan has about 122, 136. The count kind of changes depending on how they want to assign what is an active volcano that year. But we have, more than 100 active volcanoes in Japan, scattered in a line throughout the 4 main islands. And you can see these angry red triangles down the islands, and those are the volcanoes. There are 4 major observatories, which you can see on the map here, but there is no unified agency in charge of dealing with monitoring volcanic activities and then dealing with potential disasters. Many volcanologists are getting old and retiring in Japan, and they're not being replaced, which is setting up a dangerous situation for the future. So there is kind of an issue there. In the United States and many countries, we have one agency that is in charge of monitoring this type of volcanic activity and then sending out alerts. In Japan, it's not as organized, so this leads to a lot of issues. Hello, Flora. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. All right. Okay, see if I broke it yet. No, I haven't broken it. So Japan is home to 7% of the world's active volcanoes, despite only having 0.25% of its landmass. Many of these volcanoes, such as Sakurajima, which is what you see here, this is Sakurajima, smoke and steam constantly. It erupts with lava and rock flows every few years, as an example. And then this was actually once an island, but because of the constant rock flows and the lava, it no longer is an island and is connected to the other part of the island next to it. So this is a pretty frequent occurrence throughout the Japanese islands. So, they deal with, basically stuff in the air from volcanoes as a normal occurrence. And we also have this type of occurrence, which is rapid changes in atmospheric pressure and the static charges of colliding objects when the volcano erupts often lead to this lightning, which you can see here at Sakurajima. It's quite an interesting scene. Smokes and steams often sounds like my neighbor. Hello. Hello, Solid. How you doing? Welcome. Oh, I'm stuck. There you go. So with this kind of occurrence where you have like lightning happening over a very angry volcano, it's easy to understand why the Japanese Shinto religion, the traditional religion of Japan, would regard these volcanoes as gods. Because it's, quite an interesting, environmental event that happens. All right, moving on. There we go. Clicking all the things there. So much of Japan's landscape is basically defined by long, narrow valleys between tree-covered mountains. And here you see the Japanese Alps. Yes, Japan even has its own Alps, and it does have several, prime skiing resorts as well. And we have, either original forests in these hillsides, or the hillsides have been reforested. And then you have these like narrow strips of agriculture and, human activity along the little valleys, which you can see an example of in this picture. So most of the remote, forested hillsides are uninhabited. People don't usually live there, and they might be occupied by only temples and shrines. So often when we go and travel throughout Japan together in these meetings, sometimes, when we go to a certain region, there'll only be temples and shrines to talk about there. So also, it's important to know that, think of the fact that no one lives more than 70 miles from the coast in Japan. That's how an island archipelago works. So it's easy to see why seafood is such a staple of the Japanese diet. All right. Moving along. Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. If I see it, I will answer it. If I know the answer, I'll answer it. If I don't know the answer, I'll look it up. So Mount Fuji, which is what you see here, is the highest mountain in Japan. It's about 12,388 feet tall. It is actually 3 volcanoes in one, so it may just look like one, but it's actually 3. It has not erupted since 1707, but it is classified as active. Basically, if they have a historic record of something erupting, then that's qualified as active. So Fujisan is what it's, referred to as by the Japanese, and it is classified as a god in the Shinto religion. And the peak is owned by a temple complex today. This is called the Fujisan Hongu Sengen Taisha. And this is the head shrine of about 1,300 Asama shrines in Japan that all worship volcano Kami, and in particular Fuji. The central shrine is located in Fujino-maya in the Shizuoka prefecture, and it's an interesting place to visit. On May 5th, they have an annual festival there which features yabusame, which is Japanese mounted archery demonstrations. So if you're really interested in, combat, ancient Japanese combat, or medieval Japanese combat more appropriately, it's an interesting festival to go to. So Fuji's name, as it is written today in Japanese, translates to prosperous mountain. They're not quite 100% sure where the name came from, but that's what it translates to today. Red Fuji, as you can see here in the picture, and in the woodblock print on the bottom. This woodblock print was created by Hokusai. We'll talk more about woodblock prints, which are called ukiyo-e. We'll talk more about Hokusai. You may know him particularly because of that the Great Wave woodblock print, which is very famous with the big wave moving across. And then you have tiny Mount Fuji in the background of that image. Well, he created lots of woodblock prints of Mount Fuji, and this is one of them. So this is called Red Fuji. It's a phenomena that can be seen during the sunrise in the late summer and the early autumn. So basically, the light combined with the atmosphere basically turns the mountain, the volcano, red. If you see it, it's supposed to bring you good luck, so people tend to want to take pictures of it and recreate it in art and things like that. So for most of its history, women were not allowed to climb Mount Fuji, which is kind of a weird thing to think of in our world today. But the first woman to do so disguised herself as a man in 1832. She basically dressed as a man to do it. Her name was Tatsu. Everyone in her climbing party knew she was a woman, but as they encountered other groups, she had to be disguised. But the whole point was to get her to the top of the mountain and to show that women could do this. And it wasn't a question of physical ability. It was a question of religiously, should this be allowed? It was a pilgrimage site reserved for men until 1872. So until 1872, the laws weren't changed, and women were not allowed to climb it. So that's one interesting aspect of Mount Fuji, and we'll talk more about Fuji in future meetings, because it is incredibly important to the Japanese people. All right. Moving right along. No, that's not what I wanted to change. Again, this is what happens when you have two mice. All right. So with this, high level of volcanic activity comes volcanic vents, which serve to create rather interesting scenery and places to visit. For example, these sulfur vents, which are found in many of the volcanic regions, they stain the rocks yellow, and you can see that here at Hokkaido's Akan National Park. Good old dressing as a man to do things they don't like women doing. Yep, it's certainly not the only example of that happening in history. Happens all over the place. So here we have Akan National Park with our sulfurous, smelly rocks. These are rather noxious fumes, and it smells like rotting eggs. So it's fun to go look at, but not necessarily to smell. This happens basically throughout Japan. It's also at Mount Aso, as well as many other craters, and they become popular tourist sites. And one such popular tourist site is here at Owakudani. Owakudani translates to Great Boiling Valley, and you can see why it has that name. It's located in Hakone in the Kanagawa Prefecture. Here you can purchase eggs. So you see all these people standing there eating eggs, and you might be like, why? Why is everyone eating eggs? You went to these volcanic vents, and then everybody's standing around eating eggs? Like, why is that happening? So here you can actually purchase eggs that have been hard boiled in the vent waters. The eggs are called kuro tamago, which is black egg. That's a literally translation. It's black egg. And if you eat one of these, it's said to add 7 years to your life. I am not actually sure, like, if you eat 7 of them, like, will you add 49 years to your life? I'm not quite sure. So here you can see the man who, there's several people who cook the eggs, and they have these little baskets where they cook the eggs in the water. You can see he has a protective glove on because the water is incredibly hot. It's not really safe for like humans to put their hands in just, as is. Don't put your feet here. And then the eggs turn black, and you can see the black shells discarded. Everybody just drops them. Yeah, and like, how many years would that give you, right, Flora, if you ate that many eggs? I mean, that many eggs might kill you. It might have like an opposite effect of what you actually want to happen. But I mean, it's an interesting experiment. So here we have the black shells. So if you plan on visiting these types of places like Owakudani or other volcanic areas like craters or vents, it's very wise to check ahead of time if they are open. Because if it's too volcanic that day or that week or whatever, they'll shut them down. So sometimes like Owakudani will be closed for 6 months because it's just too dangerous to visit. Is there a difference with the taste of those eggs being cooked like that? As far as I know, no. They might be rather warm when you eat them, but as far as I know, like, it's basically just sulfur water, which already smells like rotten eggs to begin with. And everybody eats these things, so they probably don't taste like rotten eggs. But as far as I know, they don't seem to taste different. That is an interesting question, though. But I'll try to look that up and see what tourists and stuff have reported for how this thing actually tastes. And Owakudani is not the only place where they boil these eggs in the hot springs and then offer them to tourists. It happens throughout Japan. So whatever hot spring town you find yourself in, it might be fun to see if you can find the kuro tamagi offerings. Also, another thing to remember is it's because of the dangerous volcanic activity and the fumes and stuff like that, it might be closed. And also, even if it is open, anyone with health concerns like heart disease, if you have like a pacemaker or you're pregnant, you should probably not visit volcanic vents, So it's a good idea to keep these things in mind before you just, joyously run off to a location. All right. Moving right along, let's touch the other mouse instead of this mouse. All right, we chose the right mices. Okay. All right, so back to our snow monkey macaque friends here. So these landscapes where you have the vents and the hot springs are typically related to hell in some way in the Japanese mindset and in the Japanese language. And they're also associated with oni, which are demons. So it's believed that the demons live here in these landscapes, and this is their home. So these hot, boiling, fuming places that often smell horribly, this is where the demons live. It kind of makes a bit of sense. For example, Jikokudani is one such location. The name translates to Hell Valley. It is located in the Yamanouchi region in the Nagano Prefecture, and it is one of the most famous hot spring locations in the world because of the Macaque Snow Monkey Park, which is located here at the Joshinetsu Kogen National Park. Here you can visit the snow monkeys year-round and observe them enjoying their own hot springs or onsen. So what's happening is these monkeys kept coming down from the mountains and going into the local onsen that people had built, for humans. And so it was determined that the best way to stop this activity, because no one really wanted to bathe with the monkeys, was to give the monkeys their own onsen and then feed them at these locations so that they stuck around in that one place. So this was established in 1964, and it has been pretty successful at keeping the monkeys in that one place. And it has given, birth to this, tourist interest. So now people come and they visit the monkeys and they take pictures and that kind of stuff. I have seen people at other onsens bathing with monkeys that might have accidentally joined them, but it's generally a really bad idea to bathe with wild animals, so I do not recommend it. All right. So here we go. So here are monkeys enjoying the onsen. Here's another shot. So today, with the power of the internet, you can watch live camera feeds from this park on their website. There is, if you search for Snow Monkey Park website, you can basically find it, and you can watch the pools. Currently, it's summer, so they aren't going to tend to be there. You'll see them in basic colder months. So they use the hot water of the onsen to survive the brutal winters of this region. So if you remember in December or whatever to go back to the website and check it out. Sorry if you hear my dog playing with his food toy, because he needs to do that now, as well as drinking water before. Now he's got to eat very loudly. Alright, so the park also has its own Facebook page where it keeps guests updated on where the monkeys are currently located and if they are in the public viewing area. So, guests can't just walk in the mountains and go try to hunt down the monkeys for themselves. You can only see, humans are only allowed in certain areas, and there's a public viewing area on the onsen. So during this summer in particular, it's been very rainy, and the monkeys will often go high up into the mountains during this weather. So it's a good idea to check their Facebook page to make sure the monkeys are actually down in the viewing areas before you head to the park, And if you, know Japanese in some way, you can communicate to the people who run the park through their their Facebook site and that kind of stuff. So it's very nice that they keep you updated, and they post a lot of videos and things like that on their Facebook as well. The beauty of the internet, the modern age. All right. Moving along. So there are nearly 30,000 hot spring sources in Japan. So about 3,000 of these have been transformed by humans into onsen resort locations, like you see here. So this is the main source of the hot spring water pouring down into the pools. Each spring's mineral content varies, but to qualify as an onsen, it must have at least one of 19 specific minerals in the water. The minerals and the heat of the water are said to help a variety of health concerns such as fatigue, skin ailments, and gastrointestinal issues. Some hot springs naturally boil up to the surface, heated by magma from below. Others are tapped by humans with pipe systems to reach the water, and then it's pumped out to other locations. So Japanese onsen receive over 130 million guests per year. An excellent example of an onsen town is the one that you see here in this picture in Kusatsu in the Kanto region. It has the largest volume hot spring in Japan. It is also one of Japan's most acidic hot springs. The water kills almost all bacteria and microorganisms, and hence has a superior antibacterial power. So this is sort of what the center of the town looks like. And then next to that area is this this interesting image. So in onsen's, water must be the appropriate temperature for human use. Like, you don't want to get in the water and like burn your skin off, right? So often the water from the source must be cooled using a variety of methods. So here in Kusatsu, you can see the bath field full of boxes. So all of these boxes have a little pool of water in them, where it's, you know, exposed to the air and it's cooled, and then it's eventually pumped into the neighboring buildings. Bath salts are also collected in these boxes and sold as specialty goods. Today online, you can find a lot of these onsen bath minerals and salts for sale, sometimes directly, you know, from the town spas or inns. And speaking of inns, many Japanese ryokan also feature onsen. Ryokan is that word for inn, but not all of them do, so it's important to do your research ahead of time if you want to stay at a ryokan with an onsen. So here's one example of how the water is cooled. There's a couple other ways of how it's cooled, but this is kind of the most iconic and interesting way of how the water is cooled before it's pumped to the buildings. So also in Kusatsu, you can see an example of this public foot bath, which is frequently found in onsen towns. So this is the hot spring water that everyone is sitting there soaking their feet in. Sometimes you'll also find a fountain for your hands, sometimes even a drinking water fountain. But of course, not all onsen water is safe for drinking. So, you know, don't start slurping your bath water. Not a good idea. Stick to the drinking water fountains if they are available. Okay. Moving along. All right. Okay. So onsen will usually have both indoor and outdoor bath sections. An outdoor onsen is called a rotenboro. These are typically borrowed scenery pools in garden settings that are designed to look as natural as possible. So like what you're seeing here. The idea is to make them look as if they weren't crafted by human hands and it was already there, you know. This is a very desired garden aesthetic in Japan. So this is one example of that kind of borrowed scenery, or tenboro. Sometimes onsen are built along coastlines, as you can see here. If an outdoor bath is very visible to people, it is usually okay to wear a bathing suit in it. But generally at the inns, you enjoy onsen completely in the nude. Many different types of minerals can be found in onsen. Here in this image, you see that the water is a bit milky. Usually these are the sulfur baths. They are said to help skin disorders and arthritis. Other pools may have things like alkaline soda. These baths are recommended for women and are said to boost femininity. I have no idea how that works, but you know, there you go. That's what they report. There's my dog drinking water again. You'll also find iron baths, hydrogen carbonate, sulfate, calcium, radium, and yes, the radiant baths are very slightly radioactive. An important point to remember is to not shower after you have your dip in the onsen. You know, don't bathe or shower or you'll lose the benefits of the minerals. You want to give them time to soak and, you know, basically have your skin absorb them. So don't, you clean your body before you get into the hot spring water. You soak in the hot spring water for a little while. Don't sit in there too long or you'll probably pass out. And then you leave and go along on your day. So, moving along here. So those are the types of minerals that you may encounter in an onsen. How long can you soak in an onsen? So usually if it's like your first time and you're not an onsen addict, you'll want to sit there for 5 minutes. You'll want to get out. Maybe you want to sit on the side, just leave your feet in for a little while, and then, give yourself a 10 to 15 minute break, and then you can go back in, sit there for another 5 minutes. But it's definitely not recommended to sit in for more than 15 minutes at a time. Even in, most places where you go and they have they have a hot tub offered at a pool complex. Signs by hot tubs will usually tell you like 15 to 20 minutes maximum. So for Japanese onsen, it's usually like give yourself 5 minutes, see how it goes, sit outside on the edge for a little while, go back in, So it's not like you have to only leave after 5 minutes. You can, keep going back into the water. But definitely if you start to feel lightheaded, get out and don't go back in. Don't boil yourself to death, It's not recommended. So obviously for these hot springs, it has to be the right amount of mineral for human use. Some of these pools, the mineral, content is so high that it's basically toxic if you go in there. It will kill you. So here in Beppu, this is the pool, one of the pools in Beppu, Japan. These are the hell baths. One pool has so much iron in it that it is orange, and that is what you're seeing here. It is not safe to bathe in this. There are, lower content iron baths for humans. They are said to help the body's ability to retain heat, and when you drink the water, it helps restores the body's iron levels, so it's beneficial for anemics. But I wouldn't do that personally, and I wouldn't recommend it unless it was doctor recommended. A doctor is probably going to want you to just take an iron supplement and not drink iron water. But, that's what, the websites and stuff, when they have iron baths, they're like, we'll help your iron levels. So obviously, if you see a pool that is this orange, it is not safe for humans. And in Beppu, you will find many of these pools. So here's another example. All right. Also in Beppu. So Beppu was developed into a scenic hot spring town located in Oita Prefecture on the island of Kyushu. So maybe you can't take a dip in these pools, but they are very pretty to look at, as you can see. And then gardens were built around the pools, tours were established, and then inns and restaurants came along with that, right? Like once you get the tourists, then you get more inns and restaurants. And is now a major Japanese tourist destination. The scenic pools are usually over 100 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit, Celsius. So don't go in them. What if you want to take a dip, Legion? I don't think it's a good idea. But, if you wanted to die that way, it might be an interesting way to go. You will find safe onsen at the local inns, though. Or more like fall in on accident. I don't recommend that either. There's like pathways that you're supposed to stay on and like fences. They're specifically fenced off, and they're usually surrounded by plants so that you can't accidentally fall in. Yeah, we don't want to cook, Legion. You probably don't taste that good, right? So there are 7 scenic pools here in Beppu, including this bright blue pool. And it's this color because it's full of iron sulfate. It has a very high iron sulfate count, so that's why it looks this way. And it is so warm that they've been able to plant tropical plants from the Amazon around it, and these survive the winter because it is so hot. So we'll talk more about Beppu's sites and cultural offerings in the future. But for now, you can thank Uncle Shiny, who you see here, for this beautiful location's tourist development. So that's just his nickname because of his shiny head, his shiny bald head. He was called Uncle Shiny by everyone in town. His real name was Kamahachi Aburaya, and he worked tirelessly to promote the region and develop the sites and tours to bring guests. He's one of the first people in modern Japan who was really interested in promoting tourism. He would even climb Mount Fuji and post signs promoting Beppu all along the pilgrimage routes in Fuji, so it's kind of like the signs along the highway that you see that you like go visit this thing that's, off of Route so and so at exit 68, see this amazing thing. And he would post these signs in other famous locations in order to advertise Beppu, and he's really the first person who was doing that. He had traveled in the United States and Canada prior to his work in Beppu, so he had experienced, the Canadian and American promotional materials for tourist sites, and he essentially brought this to Japan. So when you go to Beppu, you can see this comic statue of him outside of the train station. That's what we have here. This is the train station. And he's being playfully beaten by a tiny demon. It's sort of difficult to see, but this is the tiny demon, and he's beating him with his weapon here. I'm not sure why it looks like this. Wait, I thought it was a monkey, not a kid. It's a tiny demon. Like oftentimes the demons in the Japanese mythology, they look like monkeys. So it's not a kid hanging on his back yet. It's a tiny demon, a tiny angry demon. So apparently, he was not happy that Uncle Shiny brought all of these humans to his hot springs. And as we go further in our meetings, I'll show you more of what Oni look like. And, there's a lot of promotional Oni statues at a lot of hot springs towns in various forms that we can look at. Demon child, same as, yeah, I mean, it's very, the lines are blurred. Oh, violent demon. I see no difference. Yeah, many parents would probably be like, I don't see a difference. Demon child? What? Yeah, no difference. So hot springs have been enjoyed by humans throughout time. Obviously, if you have a nice warm pool of water, it's kind of natural to want to sit in it, right? But it was during the 6th century in Japan that Buddhist practices began to encourage bathing as good for both hygiene and spiritual cleansing. So it became ritualized. And Buddhism came over to Japan from the mainland. Basically, it traveled from India through China and then down the Korean peninsula. I've glitched for you? Oh no. How do I look to everybody else? Do I look okay? Am I still moving? Am I talking? Science. Let's see. It says 0 dropped frames. I saw the glitch, but it fixed it, so okay. Hopefully it'll fix. Especially if you're on mobile. You might need to refresh if you're on mobile. It's still stuck? Oh no. Oh no. But we're almost done. I mean, we're not almost done, but we're almost done. Hopefully it gets a bit better. If I still look glitchy, try to refresh. I don't see anything wrong with my numbers. Of course, this is only my 2nd stream. Sustained loss of sound and motion here. Oh no. Oh no. Well, it's happening on like 2 sides of the world, so I don't know. Is my computer suddenly deciding to like update or something? I don't know. Good God. I don't see anything wrong. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Well, I'll keep going and see if it like fixes itself or unglitches. I don't know. I'm not sure what to do because I'm clueless. Alright. So we were talking about Buddhism. I'm back? Okay. Maybe I just needed to stop talking. Maybe OBS was like, girl, you've talked too much. Shut up. Hopefully OBS likes me again. I don't know. Maybe. So here you see the Dogo Dogo, there we go. Words. Dogo Onsen in Matsuyama. It is the oldest still operational onsen in Japan. It is over 1,000 years old. Here you can see the Karahafu curved gable. So over here on the right, this fancy curved gable above its main doorway. You will often see these. I look fine to you now? Okay. I guess OBS was just like, I don't like you for 10 minutes. So you'll often see these special curved gables above the main doorways of onsen, bathhouse buildings, as well as temples and other important buildings. It's like a mark of this is an important place. So obviously it shows us how important onsen and bathhouses are to the Japanese culture. So many Buddhist temples had baths and steam rooms constructed in them from the 6th century on that people who were both rich or poor could come to and enjoy. Sometimes the temples would actually host special campaigns to do things like cleanse all of the beggars in town for religious purification purposes. I mean, beggars is not a PC word really, but that's like how they would write about it essentially. So as time went on, wealthy families began to maintain their own onsen at their palaces or villas. Really, villas is probably a more appropriate word for it. And as we move into the Warring States period, we had a lot of samurai clans with their own onsen for healing purposes after battle, for injuries and things like that. So we'll talk more about the Japanese historical periods in the future, so y'all have more of an idea of the timeline of major events, so you'll understand, what exactly is the Warring States period and that kind of stuff. I'm going to send you a DM to remind me after the stream to show you a tool that will show you how Twitch saw your stream so you can see it from both ends. I don't think you're getting issues, but this is how you test. Okay. That sounds incredibly complicated and also very useful. Thank you very much, Legion. Thank you. That is very appreciated. So we'll get more into like the specific history so that when I say things like the Warring States period, if you don't already know what that is, then you'll be a bit more informed and as we move forward. So I've included this. It's the name is cut off, but it's Onsen Cats. It is a woodblock print by Utagawa Kunitoshi. He created it in 1884. It is cats enjoying an onsen. I included it specifically for Legion in case he showed up. So there you go. Cats enjoying an onsen. And this is a nice way to get around Twitch's terms of service, because I'm going to try to avoid showing any naked people in any of my presentations, which is a bit difficult because in the history of art there's a lot of images of naked people. So here we have cats instead. So luckily the Japanese are obsessed with cats, and so I have images like this. Cats at an onsen. Too many people streaming at your house at once. Oh, I see. Looks like Spirited Away from... Yeah, basically Spirited Away's onsen is based on places like Dogo Onsen. That is exactly correct. Cats enjoying bathing sounds fake, but okay. Well, they like to lick themselves. I mean, that's a form of bathing, but this is an actual, pools. Yeah, my cat would not enjoy this. Yes. There you go, Legion. I had to put it in for you. So during the Edo period, large bath complexes were constructed throughout Japan. It was a peaceful, wealthy time, so people had a lot more free time to enjoy these types of facilities, and they became established as sort of town centers or town halls where everyone would come together for communal bathing and share news and bond socially. So here at the Cat Onsen, you can get an idea of that. It's very popular. You have people who are dining, people who are enjoying the baths, and obviously everyone is talking, sharing ideas. I've been watching the second season of Demon Lord, and boy howdy do I question the direction they're taking the fan service. But I still claim, oh, okay. You're watching it, but you're innocent. Interesting. So after World War II, once the economic boom in Japan began, onsen towns erupted across the islands. These were typically offering 2-day, 1-night packages for families, couples, and business outings. And by the 1960s, enjoying a quick vacation in an onsen town was an established part of Japanese existence. And of course, every anime has to have at least one onsen episode, as we all know. So obviously a very important part of Japanese culture. And this is, I cropped in on the bath scene of the cats, not to be like perverted or whatever, just so you could see it easier because it's a very detailed woodblock print. So you can see the outdoor section, the Rotenboro section, where one cat is, basically sitting underneath a waterfall, a hot spring waterfall, and letting it pour all over itself. And then you can see in the other section where the cats are, bathing, rinsing themselves off, soaping themselves off, and then getting into the indoor hot springs. FBI, open up. So we'll talk, a bit more in depth about, the actual etiquette of enjoying an onsen experience. And maybe I'll use this cat image again so that it's, it's not taboo or anything like that. So daily bathing is an old custom in Japan, so it's not surprising that onsen are as popular as they are. Most homes and apartments nowadays have their own baths, but in the past you would have 1 or 2 sento bathhouses in a neighborhood. And these were the public bathhouses. And as I said, this was a way of concentrating the amount of fires being created into one place instead of having individual baths in everybody's homes. So in the modern era, with modern heating methods, this is no longer the case, and most public bathhouses are only kept operational through government subsidies. Not a lot of people go to them anymore, so they remain operational by the government giving them additional money. So in general, many people in Japan today prefer to bathe at home. But you can still find sento if you want to visit one. But like onsen, if you have tattoos, you may be denied entry at a sento. So this goes for onsen and sento. So call ahead of time to find out if you are allowed to enter. A lot of places are becoming a bit more open-minded about this and allowing tattooed people to enjoy their facilities. But a lot of them are also still very conservative and traditional, and they won't let you in. And the question is, why? And the answer is, tattoos are associated with Japanese criminals. The Japanese mafia or mob is called the Yakuza. And if you have tattoos on your body, it's basically understood that you're a criminal, you're part of the Yakuza, and they don't want those types of people at their inns or their bathhouses or their public bathhouses. So this no tattoos rule has been it's been existent for so long that I'm sure all of the Yakuza families have their own private onsen by this point, and they aren't really looking to join the tourists at like the onsen hot spring towns. So it's really, today it's really just punishing a lot of, foreign guests who have tattoos as, a form of, personal artistic communication on their body, and they aren't, Yakuza criminals. So it's really kind of, a deterrent for foreign guests. So that's why some people are trying to, be a bit more, liberal and opening up their businesses to people with tattoos. Like I said, I don't think the Yakuza are going to go to these places anyways because the rule has existed for so long. So I like the idea, but then I remember I'm super shy and I would never go. Yes. So on that point, another thing to keep in mind is throughout Japanese history, Um, well, well, we'll get to why hidden tattoos don't really they still count, because you enjoy the bath completely naked. Like, you're not supposed to wear a towel, you're not supposed to wear a bathing suit, like you're completely naked. So throughout Japanese history, mixed gender bathing was generally allowed and normal, and that means men and women, basically bathing together. So you will still find mixed gender onsen today, but generally, the more popular thing is to have separate areas for men and women. The red curtain is for women, the blue curtain is for men, so pay attention before you just randomly go inside. But yes, the idea is you get completely naked, and you scrub yourself down with soap, shampoo, all that kind of stuff. You rinse yourself off, and then you do that next to other people who are also bathing right next to you, and then once you're clean, you go step into the hot spring bath, and you're sitting there with other people, completely naked. So everyone's doing it, so it's a bit easier. But yes, everyone would see your tattoos. So unless your hidden tattoo is like really hidden in a way that, like, I'm not even sure how you got it from a tattoo artist, but honestly, people with a Navi tattoo would scare me too. That or Jar Jar Binks tattoo. Yeah, clearly, there are scary tattoos that aren't necessarily associated with the yakuza, and they're just generally scary anyways. So moving on, we have 2 more slides left. Thank you for staying with me through this hour-long presentation, hour and 20 minutes so far. So continuing our discussion of Japanese geography, most people here live on several flat coastal plains. The largest is the Kanto Plain. That may sound familiar to you because of the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923. This is the Tokyo, Yokohama, Kawasaki region, and a third of the entire Japanese population lives in this area. It is the largest urban agglomeration in the world, and it produces about 20% of Japan's manufacturing. So because all of these major cities are in low-lying plains, they are very susceptible to the tsunamis and flooding from typhoons and things like that, and of course the rising sea level, which is happening around the planet. I also want to get a tattoo of my own custom house coat of arms. But I'm never happy with my coat of arms, so I never commit. Also, Kanto sounds familiar because of Pokemon. If you know Pokemon, Kanto is going to be very familiar to you. So, for much of Japan, this is probably not a surprise. Space is a rare commodity. As early as the 1600s, the people of Tokyo, which it was then called Edo, filled in wetlands. So a lot of this was very marshy wetland area. They filled it in around the imperial palace, and they basically reclaimed land. So modern Tokyo has attracted this huge population, demanding even more space. So even more land has been claimed, filling in about 20% of the surface area of Tokyo Bay. And that's what you see here. You see Tokyo, and this is Tokyo Bay. So the Tokyo International Airport, Disneyland Tokyo, and Yokohama Seaport facilities, all of these are sitting on reclaimed land. And this type of artificial land creation has taken place in major cities throughout Japan. Pokemon was a good teacher. Yes, very much in the Dutch way of like, hey, we're running out of land, so let's just, fill this whole area with stones and mud and dirt, and basically let's try to make a new city in this marsh. That is very much the Dutch way as well, true. So the Tokyo area is among the chief producers of steel in the world. It uses iron ores from the Philippines, Malaysia, Australia, India, and even Africa. And then most of the coal used is imported from Australia and North America. The petroleum comes from Southwest Asia, Indonesia. So basically, the idea is like Japan can't easily support itself, right? It has so many people, not a lot of resources. It can't easily support itself, so it often brings in raw goods and then manufactures them into other things and then sells those manufactured goods, and that's how it sort of survived. But even food must be imported from Canada, the United States, Australia, and then trucked in from other parts of Japan into the Tokyo area, because the Kanto Plain cannot, it doesn't make enough food to sustain the population that lives there. Um, so it basically depends on this external trade for all things ranging from food to energy, which of course is not like ideal, right? As a country, you want to be as independent as possible and self-sustaining as possible, but it's very hard when your population is so large. So we live in a global economy nowadays, and Japan participates in it. So Japanese farms, they do grow fruit, vegetables, they breed livestock, and of course they grow rice. But cultivable land that can actually grow things, is at a premium in Japan. So we may think of the Japanese landscape as covered in rice paddies, but the country has to import half of its food. So it's kind of at a bit of a disadvantage because of that. Right. And of course that has a big impact upon its economy, and will continue to do so into the future. So to end, cough UK cough for independence. Yes, yeah. I mean, from a political standpoint, you want to be as independent as possible, so that if you have a disagreement with with another country, that country isn't the sole country where you get oil from, but all countries still salty. It took too long. So it's it is a disadvantage to be very dependent upon all of the other countries in the world, right? So to end today's discussion, we'll talk a little bit about demographics. Japan currently has a very low birth rate for various reasons. I could talk about that kind of stuff for half of the day, but it's a very controversial topic. But currently the population will most likely peak around 130 million, and then it will start dropping and should be about 113 million by 2025. This will continue to shrink unless something dramatic changes, and this is one of the few places in the world where this is happening. So while less people would be nice for the environment, body pillows, yeah, maybe just everyone is like, I don't need a wife, I don't need a boyfriend, I don't need a girlfriend, I don't need a husband. I'll just get this really nice body pillow, and that's all I need. Hey Stormy, thank you for joining us. I'm at the end, but thank you for coming for the end. So Japan has a history of rather harsh on its environment. It has a lot of endangered species of animals and plants. There's a lot of species that are just extinct now because of the human impact upon the environment. So it would be nice if there were less people living on Japan. The plants and animals would probably enjoy that quite a bit. I mean, if I had a Sebastian body pillow from Black Butler, I would be pretty happy. I think many of us would also like to have a Sebastian body pillow. I mean, maybe I'll write that down on my birthday list now that you've given me that idea. It's very appealing. But because the population is aging, this means that more people are going to be old and sick. Essentially, that the workforce will shrink, and then you'll have a smaller tax base to support the rising pension and welfare costs. So you'll have a whole bunch of old people who are dependent upon the government to pay for their lives, but then you'll have less young people who are making money and, paying into that tax base to support these older people. So it's a very unbalanced system, and it's also something that is slowly happening in the United States. In Japan, it's a much quicker and more dramatic version of it. So researchers suggest that more women will enter Japan's labor pool, retirement ages may rise, and that robotic technology will increase to address this problem. But many companies already have excess workers, and many Japanese graduates have trouble finding jobs in the current times of recession. Like, the Japanese economy is very healthy in many ways, but it does not grow. Typically, if you have a really healthy economy, it continues to grow and increase in its capacity to earn money. And the Japanese economy is very stagnant in that way. So it's a first world country, it is developed, it has a very healthy manufacturing, but the economy is not growing. So it will be interesting to see how this dwindling population will affect the society and the economy in the future. Hi, Mike. How you doing? Welcome. I'm afraid this is just the end, but thank you for coming in. Thank you for joining us. So next time we meet, we'll talk about Japanese history, starting from ancient times. That may take several meetings to get through, but it's sort of important to know, like, what happened during particular periods of, Japan's existence. That will inform, all of our future meetings. And then we'll start traveling around Japan together, going from, city to city, neighborhood to neighborhood. And again, we'll talk about history, culture, art, and everything like that. So that's my last slide for today. Here you're looking at the father of sushi, this lovely old Japanese man. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll write down that question about how do the black eggs taste. I mean, I've never eaten one. Black egg taste. So I'll write that down and try to look it up and give an answer. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you for everyone who showed up. I did not expect so many people to show up. I thought I would be talking to myself, so this is very, very much appreciated. It took a long time to make this PowerPoint. It took 75, it felt like 75 years. I'm a bit rusty on making PowerPoints apparently, but I'm glad that so many people showed up. I hope that I hope everyone learned something, maybe even just a little bit of things. So if nobody has any questions, I will be signing off. Legion has no questions. Okay, all right. Well, if you think of any, feel free to ask me them in the future. And of course, if I don't know the answer, I will try to look it up and figure it out. So thank you for coming, everyone. I really appreciate you guys. Glad I made this one. I had fun. Thank you. Princess of PowerPoint. Oh, that would be nice. I would feel like a princess of PowerPoint if I did this faster than like the 75 years it took me to make it. But thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you everyone for attending. I will see you next time, hopefully. All right. I'll load my other screen now. Again, sorry about the glitches that happened in the middle. I guess OBS just didn't like me. But thank you for coming, everyone. Thank you, Flora. I hope everyone learned something. All right. Have a good day, everyone. I love y'alls. Bye-bye.